Our first speaker here is Maureen Timmons, and Maureen is the Director of Dining Services here at NU, and she has a bachelor's and a master's from Johnson & Wales University and an AOS from the Culinary Institute of America. And she's also a student in the Doctorate of Education program in higher ed here at NU. Next to her is Drew Love, and Drew is coordinator of volunteer and outreach programs at Mass Farmers Markets, and is a technology and social network specialist for food justice. I think it's kind of your own title. And Drew has a BA in philosophy from BU. And then last but not least is Brad McNamara, who is a co-founder of an organization called Freight Farms, which Freight Farms are modular, expandable, portable, profitable production units for hydroponic crop production. And Brad is an NU alum with a BS in communications. He also has a master's in environmental science and policy from Clark University, and is working on his MBA also at Clark. So,
hi everybody, thanks for coming. As Kate said, I've been here at Northeastern for I think 18 years, and the career path that sort of led me toward Northeastern is interesting just for those of you that are kind of heading in that direction. Luckily in high school I sort of figured out that food was my thing. My aunt and uncle owned a restaurant, and I thought that was sort of interesting. And back when I was in high school, that was not really, food and restaurants and all that were not that trendy. Now it's very sort of hip and cool to do that. But back then I remember the guidance counselor at the high school said, "Nah, I don't really think that's a good career for you." I said, "You don't?" She's like, "No, I don't think so." And then when I decided I thought I should go to school in Rhode Island at Johnson & Wales, and they were sort of new and getting into the hospitality business, there's a small school called Paul Smith's, which was like in the next town over from upstate New York, about an hour south of Montreal. She said, "I think you should just stay here and go real close." And I thought, I don't think so. So nonetheless, I decided to go down to Johnson & Wales, which was at the time a great thing to do, and go to school there and go into hotel office. And luckily that ended up being the career that I really liked. I have a lot of friends that I went to school with that are nowhere near the food business. And luckily I get to work in the part of the food business at an institution, which is really exciting. How I ended up here at Northeastern is after culinary school, I was managing a restaurant, and I was working on my master's degree, and I said, I really want to work. I did a little list of here's what I want to do next year. I really want to work at a higher education institution. I really want to work sort of more of a regular schedule. I want to work with students. I had a very specific list, and one day I'm flipping through the paper, and it says, Director of Quality Assurance and Training at an institution in Boston. It didn't say which one, so I sent my resume. I was like, I'll just send a little resume, see what happens. I'll send them, I'm the perfect match for this job, and here's why, which I'm sure they're like, great. So I sent the thing, they called, and they said, you're a little overqualified for the position that we're looking for, and it only pays X, which was less than I was making, about $10,000 less than I was making at the time. But I thought, still, it was really kind of aligned with all the things that I want to do. So I came here, and at the time it was DACA. Chartwell's is our current food service contractor, and at the time it was DACA, so DACA was the food service contractor, so I was working for them at Northeastern. And I was there probably about a year, and then my current boss, who's the Director of Business Services at the university, called and said, hey, I've only met him probably twice before that. Hey, it's Bill, I was wondering if you'd like to come work for us. And I was like, really? So within one day, I became my boss's boss. So I went from being the contractor to the client within like 24 hours. So luckily, he was a really nice boss before, so it kind of worked out well. But I've been in this position for about 16 and a half years. So here in Northeastern, I sort of a generalist in food. It's almost like I'm the only person at the university that oversees food and has anything to do with food on the university side. So I analyze financial statements. I look at marketing. We do a lot to do with the culinary side. We talk to the chefs. We were just doing burger tasting this morning about different burgers and the quality, and is it local, and is there antibiotic-free, and all that stuff. So marketing, training, financial, we just did any kind of project, the Curry Center, the International Village, so anything gets renovated, that's all, I'm responsible for all that. So anything food on campus, I have responsibility for, whether it's at the Marino Center, at the Curry Center, the dining halls, everything. So it's a great job, it's a lot of fun. I'm lucky that I kind of found the career early, and it's worked out well. So
I actually currently work with the Northeast Organic Farming Association and an organization called the Real Food Challenge. So with NOFA, the Northeast Organic Farming Association, involved in 2 projects there. One in particular I think is more relevant to food justice, and that is a low-income CSA coordinator. So a CSA, if you're not familiar with it, is called, it's an acronym for Community Supported Agriculture. Essentially, it's where a group of people will pay a farm to do a delivery of vegetables or produce from that farm to a specific site. And we're doing a pilot project that started at the beginning of this year that works with different local farms and providing produce specifically to organizations that work with low-income populations in the greater Boston area. So right now we're working with Madison Park Development Corporation's an affordable housing unit in Roxbury, as well as the East Boston Neighborhood Health Center in East Boston. And so that project is up and running as of June of this year, and we're looking to expand to 3 additional sites by the end of this year to have 5 programs up and running by June of 2013. So delivering fresh local food to local populations. And then I'm also working with a group called the Real Food Challenge, and I have been involved with them off and on for about 3 years, just most recently came on board as the Assistant Northeast Coordinator. And so what we do is actually work with students and actually in dining hall administrators and different universities across the country in order to help shift dining hall dollars into purchasing more local, sustainable, and fairly traded food. So every year or so, dining halls across the country typically spend about $5 billion collectively on food. And so our goal is to shift 20% of that, or $1 billion, into a sustainable, fair, community-based food system. And so that's a little bit of what I'm doing with them. And what has led me to this particular path is just sort of about 3 years ago or so, I kind of had this emerging interest in both social justice issues as well as environmental sustainability. And that kind of came out of just doing a lot of reading and really kind of trying to figure out what was important to me and where my values were and what kind of impact that I wanted to make. And so for me, these two worlds, environmental sustainability and social justice, they seem to be bridged by food. And I felt like if I could work on food issues, then I could simultaneously be working on both of those issues and moving those values forward. So start off with a lot of volunteering and a lot of just kind of like knocking on doors and trying to figure out what was out there. And then eventually, over time, volunteer positions transforming into internships, paid internships, and other positions. And it's a career path that I am very, very, very happy with.
Freight farms, first of all, the reason I'm here and what kind of got me into food. As was described, we use upcycled shipping containers. So the containers you see on ships, on trucks, all over the urban environment, they're everywhere. You can't get away from them. We use those. We've developed an interior system using hydroponic growing technology, emerging LED technology, as well as digital automation and monitoring, so that we literally just try and allow anyone to grow food anywhere, so that someone can run this unit without the benefit of a PhD and a decade of experience in greenhouse growing and whatnot, because all of our units are interconnected to our experts, so that you get that peace of mind and you get that expert support where all you want to do is grow fresh food in your neighborhood. So we've been able to create this product and this service that provides that. So that's Freight Farms, where we're at right now. We just developed the technology in the last year and a half, built out a prototype and have been running it in Worcester. We'll be installing a unit here in Boston September 25th. The containers go down on site, which is exciting for us. We've had outreach and had clients from Japan in the last couple weekends to be able to affect change in the irradiated zone of Japan from that catastrophe we're all aware of. That's their main concern, is they need safe food, they need a way for the people to empower themselves and grow it. And when the land, the water, the air is all questionable in that area, they have some serious issues trying to find a way to do that. So they came over with the hopes of our product living up to our promises, which luckily for us, they all came over. So we did. Tried some of the basil we were growing at the time and really enjoyed it, so that worked out. My journey from where I was in your seat not too long ago, but a little bit long ago, to today. I graduated Northeastern in 2003, and was actually one of my co-ops turned into a full-time job, So I was full-time working in radio, actually, at KISS 108 here in Boston. And right around graduation was time for contract negotiations. Sat down with the program director and told him that I was quitting, and my last day would be on graduation day. So that was a tough phone call to make to my dad, tell him I turned down contracts and was quitting that job. And then actually ended up starting a marketing company with 2 partners in 2004, shortly after graduating, and ran that until 2010. And over that time, my interest in marketing in that game, I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do for my whole life. It was something that was a lot of fun and a great experience at the time, but it wasn't what I wanted to be doing for the rest of my life, because it really wasn't selling anything of substance or doing anything of substance. It was just, how can we sell more of this? How can we get more people involved in this? But this was, you know, our main clients were beer and liquor, nightlife. We were doing I'd gotten into doing a lot of media buying, so like buying and selling airtime, which is literally buying and selling nothing for nobody. So, you know, that was less than fulfilling, and I knew that. So I sort of pursued my passion that had been early on in environmental science and started looking at programs to push that forward. And that's when I decided to pursue my master's in environmental science at Clark University. They actually have a program, it's their dual degree program, where I was able to, it's a 3-year program, where I'm able to, you know, sort of double up on some classes and get my MBA as well as my master's in environmental science and policy. So that was, that has been and it is awesome. And yeah, right now we have office space here in Boston down in the Seaport, the newly emerging innovation district, as part of the Mass Challenge program.
I think on campus the best ways to do it are kind of to get involved with the different groups of like-minded students. There are some, and like Slow Food has things that they're specifically interested in. Heat has specific things that they're interested in. We work with all the groups, PSA, SGA, they sort of all, if you kind of figure out which one works best for you, or you could just come to a food advisory board meeting. We do it at 7 in the morning. But
I think like talking to other people who are currently working in the field, I don't think there's anything that could be as advantageous, as educational, and as helpful in terms of actually securing positions. It's actually a talk about, I'm really interested. I've done some workshops specifically with university students about finding jobs like in these types of fields and doing some of the research. I mean, the numbers vary a little bit, but I've seen numbers as low as 50 and as high as 80% saying that's the number of jobs that actually are never publicly advertised. So that means for every one job that you see on a job board or a listserv, there's 4 others that you will never read about. Because they're circulated internally, people have an idea of who they already want to hire. And I think the most important thing is getting a sense for how can you become sort of like in that internal track. I think the easiest way to do that is just to have lots and lots of conversations with people who are already working in the field. And you can go to sites like Good Food Jobs. There's also there's several listservs. There's like just like a massive email list essentially. There's one called Com Food that's pretty good. There's also if you're specifically looking for food, there's BFS. It's the Boston Food System listserv. I think the most important thing is to get an idea for like the different organizations and types of jobs that are in this field, because you could do anything from being a farmer to doing policy analysis to coming up with like new marketing solutions and infrastructure for agriculture. And so there's an incredible range of skills. And the most important thing is finding like what types of skills you want to use. And the best way I think to do that is by talking to other people. And it's also by talking to people and building relationships that you actually then kind of get on that inside track, and there's a greater possibility of getting that next job or the next internship. I mean, both of the jobs that I have right now, I think were technically publicly listed, but I got them because I had pre-existing relationships with both organizations. And previous internships that I've had that I think have been hugely influential in terms of like moving my career along have been positions that I've essentially created by contacting organizations that I wanted to work with and then talking to them. And just finding like, oh, like, you seem to have like, it seems like you need somebody doing this with your organization. Like when I first contacted the Real Food Challenge, they did not, and this was 3 years ago, they did not have somebody working actively in Boston. So I said, I'm looking to get more experience. I'd love to help you with students in Boston. They said, fine. Basically create an internship position for me. And I think that happens way more often than I think is typically really talked about.
For me, it actually, the moment of like complete despair turned into actually spawn freight farms. Because before I was working with a group, we had formed a consultancy, business implementation group to consult on urban rooftop development using greenhouses and technology for urban food production. And I loved that. Like it brought together everything I thought was awesome and was solving like a serious problem. And it just came to pass that the clients we were consulting with and the projects we were coming up with, the side of me that wanted to create something and do something that could affect a lot of people and make sense financially and business-wise, was just like sirens going off. Like, dude, this doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for this business. It doesn't make sense for a subset of a subset of a subset of a subset that could possibly access this. So that was discouraging, but then it sort of forced myself and now my current co-founder to say, well, what's wrong with that solution and what's wrong with that technology? And then dig in, and eventually through a lot of trial and error, a lot of experimentation, a lot of research, we got to freight farms. So I mean, it was like a low point when I had to have multiple meetings with clients and say, I know you love this design, this business implementation plan and all that. It's a terrible idea. I can't tell you to do it.
So I think it's a matter of definitely like connecting to passion and also connecting to peers. Like having other people who are like doing similar work to me, as well as having people who are maybe 10, 20, or 30 years down the road has been really helpful. Like for me, like every year or so, I kind of go through a very reflective phase, usually around like September. I don't know why, it just happens. And one of the things I start doing is I very intentionally start reaching out to people, either I know them or I don't, who I've been impressed with the work that they're doing. And I just say, I think you're doing really phenomenal work. I'm at a point where I'm kind of like starting to question some of the own things I'm doing and getting a sense for how I want to move forward. Do you mind if we have a conversation? I'm always very surprised, pleasantly, by how many people say yes. Like let's meet up, let's have coffee, and let's just like talk about kind of like where you are and where you're at, where you want to be. So I think the idea of like finding the right job is great, and at the same time there's this other component of just making sure like you're socially connected to peers who you admire and to mentors who can really kind of help shape your career path.
And I think every day in the food world is challenging. in good and bad ways, I think that's probably why I like it to some degree, and here in particular, it's so large. I mean, there are 30 food locations on campus. The dining halls alone serve about 2 million people a year. So I think sometimes the sheer volume can be a bit overwhelming, and everyone here has an agenda of some sort. We try to work very close with students and have them drive an agenda. But there's a lot of agendas, so it's always trying to manage which agenda comes first. And we also have all of our own. So I think it's just the volume here that sometimes can be overwhelming. But and that's also the part of it that's exciting. So it's a combination of challenging and exciting pretty much every single day. We have students actually that come and redesign the dining halls about once or twice a year. I'd say, where were you when we were really, really redesigning? But it was, yes, I mean, we see that just in working with students where they come in and they say, actually the flow would go better if you did this and this, and often it's a renovation. We don't really have the ideal choice of an empty box, but I see, and we work, on all the projects. We work with a ton of engineers, and they definitely help all the projects we do. As far as like the Curry Center is a huge ton of engineering support on that. We're looking at another project possibly at INB for next summer. We're engaging some engineers already on that. So I don't know as far as like the food justice part, but definitely in the food world for sure.
So I think you could do anything and apply it to any field. Like if your passion was, I was actually using this example, I don't know why it came to me, but like if your passion was like designing bunny costumes, like there's probably some way, if you're creative enough, to figure out how that's going to further food justice. It's really just a matter of kind of connecting with different people and trying to figure out how that's actually going to work out. I mean, with mechanical engineering in particular, it's not a skill set I have, so I have to let you know that. But I mean, it could be anything from like designing like farm equipment, or I mean, it sounds like the project that you're working on has a lot of engineering components. So there's certainly I think a demand and an interest for it. It's just a matter of kind of finding like what you would like to develop, or where's the need. that skill set.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say, like, when it comes to that sort of thing, I think we actually have trouble getting really good, engaged, passionate engineers, because they all, not they all, I'm not going to generalize all engineers, but there's not a lot of interest in certain particular fields like mechanical engineering to go into food. And I mean, what we're focused on is, making food more efficient and more accessible to more people through that infrastructure and through vertical growing and things of this nature, and using that technology and all that all integrated. So I mean, for us, you can use mechanical engineering, especially you kind of, you'd be one of few with that skill set that's really looking at it.
One thing I didn't think of a specific example. There's actually a lot of movement right now around this idea of mobile markets. So it's essentially creating vehicles or retrofitting vehicles and then driving fresh food into low-income areas or more rural areas. So there's a farm called Enterprise Farm here in Massachusetts, and the woman's awesome. She just had this old school bus, retrofitted the whole thing, and turned it into a farm stand, and would just drive it around to different areas that didn't always have access to farmers markets. And this is just one of many examples. So I mean, I do think there is definitely an emerging interest, and along with that, a larger number of jobs. I mean, there's an entire job board, the Good Food Jobs. There's multiple listservs. I do think at the same time, the economy is still not awesome, and there's and it is still a younger field. So I think in that sense that there's maybe not quite as many jobs as there is interest. At the same time, I think because there's a growing interest, it's also a really exciting time to kind of figure out, well, what are different ways where people with this interest can get together and try to figure out, how can they sort of make their own position, kind of going along with this, I think this extreme interest in entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurial activities. I mean, a friend of mine just finished a PhD in sociology and is launching a really amazing program called Green Dragons, which combines martial arts education, literacy, and gardening into after-school programs. And so this is something that he came together because he was interested in all those things, and just kind of, and also very important, had pre-existing relationships. He had been teaching martial arts for several years, and had also been teaching inside different public school systems around sustainability. And so I think that there aren't maybe as many positions as people want those positions, and at the same time there's a lot of room for kind of figuring out how can you or a group of your friends or peers add something itself to the field.
I think I'd have to agree. I mean, everything hasn't developed and matured, yet, which is probably a good thing. And I mean, I think because the food system as a whole, I feel needs so many different solutions in order to work better. It's there can't be one that's going to do it. It's just not possible. It's not feasible. It's not realistic. So in that, everyone's so early, and there are different solutions that are coming out. It's kind of awesome that there's, if there's not something that fits you, you can make it and push it and make it happen. And if it's solving part of the food problem that you're focused on, people are going to support you. There's going to be space for it. It might not be, it's definitely not going to be, you apply, you get the job, you show up at 9, you leave at 5. That's not going to happen, but I don't think you're going to get that in a lot of the traditional jobs now either. So it's kind of pick your poison there. But there's so much and so many solutions that need to be improved, implemented, and created even, that, it's, to me, it's just exciting. It's I wish I could do more, I wish I could get involved in more of the things, and I kind of have to pull back and be no, this is your chosen path. This is what you're really excited about, It's, I think, awareness and sort of an interest in doing things slightly different. Because a lot of the people we're working with right now, working with distributors who, bring in tons of food every year from all over the globe, and then literally just break it up, pack it, and send it throughout the city. Early client here in Boston, they're forward thinking, and they're well, if I can cut out sourcing that thousands and thousands of miles every day, you know, and just being strapped by I have to source it no matter where it comes from, no matter how I get it, you know, like to control that aspect of whatever they're doing through the implementation of a freight farm. Like for them, it's a great application because it also makes them money, which in their long term, that's really all that matters. But for us, that's okay. We want people to be able to make money, but we want people to make money in fresh food that is grown locally. So for us, it's more of the being aware and being, I guess, having the wherewithal to do things a little bit differently. You know, like actually grow commercial scale, like in the neighborhood, and create a business platform around that, and try and cut out a lot of that unnecessary shipping and moving of food.
I think, you know, part of it is possibly policy. Just like a few very specific examples. One of the projects I've been working on, actually when I was with Mass Farmers Markets, was basically accepting food stamps at farmers markets. This gets kind of technical kind of quickly, but I'll give you like a abbreviated version. Essentially, food stamps used to be like tangible, like physical items, kind of like stamps. And it switched over to like a debit card-like system. And farmers markets across the country are typically cash only. And so when that switch happened, what had been a multi-million dollars going into farmers markets from food stamps was essentially wiped out because they just didn't have the technology, the infrastructure to accept that form of payment. And then it was a matter of, well, still a matter of ongoing years in order to try to figure out how to get technology into the market to accept, you know, these millions of dollars that had been supporting like a more local agricultural system. You know, part of it's also just infrastructure, like trying to figure out how can we have a more regional-based food system to actually, especially like to institutionally purchase food. That's either like local or organic or fair trade. Like one of the things that we're doing with the Real Food Challenge is like switching over institutions. And so we had University of Vermont sign on to commit to purchasing 20% real food by 2020, which is great. But then it creates this other question of trying to figure out infrastructurally, how does that work? Because there's typically not a lot of infrastructure in place for large-scale institutions to be purchasing that much food. A lot of sort of like the purchasing of real food tends to be happening more so at the consumer level and at the retail level as opposed to the institutional level. So there's also just a lot of infrastructure that has to happen.
For what I do, I think it's important to have, I needed to have a business background as well, so I have my culinary degree so I can go in and talk to the chefs and, you know, have credibility in talking about food, the restaurant management side, and also the business side. So for what I do, I sort of had to have a very broad set of skills because I'm not even in project management, which wasn't even on my radar, but I do a ton of that. So it's, I think, just keeping your skill sets wide open and kind of being open to, I think you can probably make it work no matter what your skill set is, as long as you're passionate about something. But for my job, I had a very different, wide set of skills, and definitely some businessy classes helped for what I'm doing. It may not, depending on what you're most interested in, but for what I'm doing, it was definitely needed that part as well. But it's very important to have also the culinary side. You know, in fact, I went to culinary school. You know, you go to these chefs and they don't, you know, they can't say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Actually, I do. So, you know, it's very helpful because, you know, other people can go in, you know, and everyone's a food expert because we all eat food.
It might be to your benefit if you don't have a specific food program, because then you know what you're interested in, which you can then take the classes that interest you as far as skills go and things that, you know, that specific skill set you're interested in, and then you get to be the person that's going to take that and apply that to food. You know, so you might be in a class full of, you know, engineers, you know, just randomly picking that as a skill set. You know, you might be the only one in that class that is like, you know, my movement, my passion, my first thing I think of is how do I apply this to, you know, a particular part of the food system. You know, so in that regard, you're kind of in a nice position in that you have the ability to sort of pick up those classes that you're interested in that you get, you know, might be really good at. You'll find some aspect of a science or something like that you're really good at, and no one else there is pulling that skill into food. And you are then that person that when you graduate, you know, you've talked to people in the industry, you've realized certain parts of food, the food system or whatnot that you're really interested in. You then get to go to those organizations and be that person that says, you know, I have become an expert in this skill of, you know, geology or whatever it is, and they're like, wow, like, we don't have anybody who can do that, and you love this aspect, so we need you to do that. So I mean, in that regard, I don't think you need a food major at all, because it is such a huge thing that you can sort of inject yourself in, as long as if that's what you want to do.
And to add to that, if anytime you're taking a class and the professor is sort of open to you, if you're writing a paper or doing a project, ask them if you can somehow connect it to food. Often they'll be open to that. I found in the doctorate program I'm doing, it's in doctorate in education, and at first trying to incorporate food in education, they were like, I don't know about that. But as I kept talking to them about this, they were more open to me including that into some of the papers that I wrote and some of the research that I did, which kind of helped the whole process. And they actually found it more interesting because everyone else was really focused on education, and I don't have a background in education, so mine was definitely heading in the food direction. They were very open to me writing papers and doing research, connecting those two topics.
I don't think it's really so much, especially at the undergraduate level, about a major, as much as it is about the things that you're interested in. And really, I think the most valuable way to spend your time would be to also just to get out there and to reiterate, to talk to other people, and then see if you can find yourself, either through co-op programs or internships or volunteer programs, developing very specific skill sets. Because if you wanted to, you could use mechanical engineering. There's an increasing demand now for different food organizations hiring social media and communications experts, or people who are doing grant writing. And these are all skills that might not actually come under the direct purview of, say, an environmental studies field or a food major, but they're definitely skills that can sort of come up as you kind of focus on your own interests and your own projects when you're working with different organizations.
I mean, for us specifically, we just have a few growing positions for the more to develop the system and the growing procedures that then we pass on to the users so that they can use it themselves. So I think from there it's sort of a blend of the management experience as well as the growing experience. It's tough to say which we look at more because the growers we have in unit now are not so much focused on actually being growers, but being growers to teach others and develop that aspect of the software that say, hey, you need to do this, look for this, key indicators and things like that. So for us, it's management as well as growing. I can't say more on either way.
Yeah, and I think it really comes down to, the position, but I think more importantly, it also comes down to your interests. For example, I'm also a CSA coordinator for this farm, Red Fire Farm, and so I kind of help them unload the truck and distribute vegetables. And I talk to a lot of people who are the drivers, and there's this one guy in particular, and one of the things is that he's been working at the farm for at least a few years now, and he's kind of been promoted, so now he's more of a manager, and he doesn't like it because he's getting more money, which is nice, but exactly, his thing was really actually doing the farming. So it comes down to, I think, having a clear picture of which skill set you really executing on a day-to-day basis. And then in terms of going about gathering those skills, farming positions actually aren't too hard to come by. Especially in Massachusetts, there's a lot of opportunity on a lot of really, really phenomenal farms that aren't, some of them not even that far from Boston. There's also a fair amount of more urban ag opportunities. Those might be a little more ad hoc in terms of figuring out which different schools sort of have urban gardens, and then trying to figure out how you can sort of gather experience by maybe volunteering or starting on, or pitching a co-op to them or something like that. But those are also very different skill sets, urban gardening versus commercial rural farming.